I think everyone would have heard about Leonys Petruscus by now. So he was your main perpetrator. That's the way I just say that. Fiona, what would you call him?
Leonys, I'd say he was the gatekeeper to everybody else who abused me. So Leonys was a Jesuit, and he was the high priest of the Sutherland Shire area. He was good friends with my grandmother, Helen Holozak or Holocek, and they lived near each other in Engadine. He had a doctor's surgery just around the corner from my grandmother's house in Engadine, and everything was focused around there. And he had phenomenal connections with MK Ultra and all the MK Ultra perps, and the OTO at Sydney University, and Anthony Kidman. Personally good friends with Anthony Kidman. And
Let's slow down here for a second. All right, I reckon we should go back a bit. And this is hard because he's such a central figure in it all. And I'll start with his father. And a lot of this information I didn't know till not that long ago, which really clarified a lot of it for me. But so who was Kypris Petrauskas? Well, obviously.
Yeah, all I knew was he was an opera singer.
Yeah, that's it. Me too. A lot of it was in Lithuanian, the information about him, and
Yeah.
I had trouble like translating it, and not all the information came clear. But yeah, he as far as we could tell through Wikipedia and all the English pages and what we could translate easily, he was an opera singer in Lithuania. But Lithuania is an interesting place because it was under Nazi occupation at some point, and then it was under Soviet occupation. But in the most important parts of Kypros's life, he was working with the Soviet Union. So we'll get into that in a second. So he was, according to Wikipedia, a Lithuanian operatic tenor. He was working with the National Opera Foundation in Lithuania. And he just trying to find more information about his upbringing. It is limited, but he was involved, and I'll just get the right date here. Let's have a look. He was involved in one of the early revolutions in the Soviet Union, and he provided a lot of, I guess, propaganda for it. I guess the rebellion employed his, skills as an opera singer to, motivate a lot of people. And he ended up receiving an Order of Lenin at one point. And that is the highest order you can, achieve under, in the Soviet Union. That's, when you have done the state, the most benefit or whatever, you get that prize. It's the highest order for, I think, civilian work, but also in the military, if I'm correct. But he wasn't just a great citizen or a great communist citizen in the Soviet Union. He was also part of the Soviet Union itself. He was what they call a deputy to the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union. And this was just shortly after his son came to Australia, but we'll get to that in a moment. So what's the Supreme Soviet? Basically, it's the highest legislative body in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So the only one with the power to pass constitutional amendments, according to Wikipedia. So basically, it's like the highest, level of government, highest branch of government in the Soviet Union. So that is extremely interesting. And mainly because everyone knows Leonys as a Nazi, which he was. I mean, he had all the papers showing that he worked for the Nazi party. His family even admits that he was very close to groups like the Luftwaffe in getting his way out of war-torn areas. And he was very closely allied. He even saved the life of a German soldier. And I mean, it was strange to me that they'd admit that. But when we look later at who Leonys was associating with, it seems more like he was truly more of a communist than, say, a National Socialist or a Nazi. I mean, it's very complicated, but it's very interesting because what was the Soviet Union? It was probably one of the most evil things that happened in history, caused the most amount of deaths. 50 to 60 million people died because of that, starting from the revolutions, Bolshevik Revolution. And there's a great page, an article on the Epoch Times. It's titled "The Dark Origins of Communism," and there's 3 parts to it. But the most interesting bit is in the 3rd part because it really explains all the occultism, how it's tied into communism, how the big goal is revolution. And it's interesting when you think of MK Ultra, because what was MK Ultra? You know, if you study it, you find out Aldous Huxley really came up with it. But what was his game? His game was the final revolution. When he speaks about the control of people's minds, dumbing them down, he uses the phrase "the final revolution." When he speaks about his MK Ultra plan, he always, I guess, most notably would have described it as the final revolution. And he was a revolutionary, just an extremely evil one. You know, some revolution is bad, some revolution is good. But this article just explains how occultism created, I guess, the idea of revolution against man and God. And there's a great quote in this article. It's by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was a victim of communism, I believe. I think he was in a gulag. I've read only a tiny bit of his work, but he's a very interesting guy. So he's a Russian author and historian. He says about communism, he was a direct victim of it. Within the philosophical system of Marx and Lenin, and at the heart of their psychology, hatred of God is the principal driving force, more fundamental than all their political and economic pretensions. That's a pretty powerful quote. I mean, you know,
this is just it. I mean, this blows my mind because, you know, I thought Nazism was the enemy, and I know they say socialism and communism, you know, meet around the back, but I'm surprised that, like, when you said to me, look, they were all your perps, I think the summary you sent was, they're all commies, like this, and I'm going, huh? You know, I'm going, okay, I've got to get my head around this, and then I couldn't. I stumbled through another interview, and I'm saying, well, apparently now they're all communists. Okay, so I don't know. I've got to work out how this all goes together. But it's funny you say this because I know from my studies, and I know from, especially even in law school, I think it's one of the introductory units in psychology, in gifted education studies. It was all about Marxism. And what a great guy he was. And then I wrote, I said every application of his theories resulted in mass deaths and whatsoever. Oh no, you're not allowed to do that. So, you know, fail almost in assignments. But this is what they're pushing in universities and schools now, especially at university level, in all disciplines, especially where you think there's no way you could squeeze some communist doctrine in there.
Yeah, well, this is it.
But and it's taken over everything.
And Leonys's father was, you know, a very influential figure in the Soviet Union from, I think, 1951 to 1954. He was sort of in power. He got the Stalin Prize in 1951, the Order of Lenin, the Order of the Red Banner of Labor. He was what they call a presidium member, Lithuania Supreme Soviet, so he represented Lithuania, and won the Popular Artist Award of the USSR. So, you had to be really sucking up to the regime of death to get that. You had to be going along with everything. And here's the thing, right? I mean, did Leonys just somehow get into occultism, by chance, by his own choice, or was he brought into it? Well,
No,
I
raised
would
him.
have to
Oh my
say
gosh.
that, someone who's part of that kind of government, who's going to go along with that sort of, evil. I guess Satanism is the best way to say it. And
No, Lucifer. No. It's not.
all right,
Luciferian.
let's say Luciferianism, because to me it's
It
really
is.
the same thing, but it gets more.
Let me just
Accurate.
say there.
Yeah.
Let me interject there, because people talk about,
Mhm.
there's a term they use, Illuminati, and whatever, and it's got that real conspiracy ring to it. But Illuminati means enlightened ones. It's to do with being enlightened. But Luciferians, Lucifer means light bearer
Well,
as
hey,
well.
I'll just stop you there as well to clarify the Illuminati. I mean, let's get this straight, okay? So Leon Trotsky, he was obviously a leader of the Russian Communist Party. He wrote in the 18th century, Freemasonry became expressive of a militant policy of enlightenment, as in the case of the Illuminati, who were the forerunners of revolution. So the Illuminati were really about revolution. So I guess it goes back to, if I'm correct, the Alumbrados in Spain, and what they call it just the Spanish Illuminati, had a lot to do with the Jesuits and Ignatius de Loyola. And there was a lot of sort of spiritual practices that were banned and outlawed by the church, I believe, and that sort of influence came through, and it was about causing revolution in the church, in spiritual teaching, and then I guess in this case in the Bavarian Illuminati, this was the supposed enlightenment of man. And I think if you look at a lot of what the Illuminati were trying to do, it did closely mirror what Karl Marx wanted in the Communist Manifesto. So Trotsky also noted that those to the left of the Illuminati culminated in the Carbonari, referring to the Carbonari secret revolutionary societies in Italy. These societies were prominent during the Napoleonic Wars, partly credited with the spread of socialist ideas. Illuminism was among, and this is just from the Epoch Times article, Illuminism was among the many occult philosophies of the time, with influences from ancient belief systems of Gnosticism and Hermeticism. It was based on a loose idea of personal enlightenment through reason, with a heavy focus on materialism and the nature of man, and often with a strong anti-religious and anti-government overtones. So, it's a mix of ideas, but basically it's revolution. And going back to Luciferianism,
it's revolution, rebellion.
It's rebellion against God. That's
rebellion.
Yeah, that's it. And I guess that quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, it just says, look, I know everything about it, and it's just a hatred of God. It's a hatred of humanity. They're rebelling against God. That's all this revolution is. There's no economics behind it. There's no benefit to anyone.
No.
It's
that's why the doctrine we learnt in law concerning Marxism was, there is no rule of law.
Yeah.
And there was an encouraging of rioting against the rule of law.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what is actually in Law 101, Philosophy of Law Studies, right? Philosophy of law. And what did you get with all this, for example, not that I'm really either way with, left versus right, but now I'm going way more right because of all this sort of stuff. And what's manifesting now? The extreme left. And, we don't like who everyone, democratically voted for, so we're going to go and riot in the streets and burn cars.
Yep.
And then we're going to hold marches, the Luciferian left are going to round up all these stupid young women from university and wherever and tell them it's all about women's power and women's right and all this crap, all these socialist groups that you have at university, and, and round them all up and get them to come to a rally run by that moronic newsreader that she got an award for in Australia. It's not, is it Tracy Spicer? Is that who did it?
That's it.
Yeah. What an idiot. And so everyone just blindly follows her and, oh, this is such a great thing we've achieved. What did you know, I got on there on the internet and everyone else followed me, all the people with me going, yeah, what did you achieve, Tracy? Just spell out what you achieved.
Yeah.
You know, why didn't you go and rally in the streets and against child trafficking?
Yeah.
Something useful instead of anti-Trump.
And that's who Leonys' father was. He was basically just an Antifa thug who was, you know, very sophisticated because he was, you know, a great opera singer. He was, and I just have to apologize for my voice. It's very croaky today. Waking up pretty earlier than usual. And yeah, just get that out.
It's the first day of daylight saving.
Exactly.
We booked this for a lazy 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning, and turns out, it was 7 o'clock.
That's it. So that's the reason my voice is so croaky. I'm not like some, you know, dodgy guy. I mean, our voice just sounds bad today. So anyway, get that out of the way. But look, so Leonys' father was a communist, hated God, was an Antifa thug, and, you know, supported the deaths of, you know, tens of millions, and was part of the most Luciferian regime that ever existed. By definition, by people who understand it best way possible, it was just the biggest revolution against God, and that was part of their plan. Communism comes from the occult. The Illuminati has more to do with communism than Luciferianism, I believe, but the ultimate goal they have is a Luciferian agenda, if that makes sense. So basically, they're all working for Satan.
This is because people say to me.
No, the thing is, like, a lot of them are all atheists too, and atheists serve the same goal as most Luciferians. Anyway, and I don't want to upset, you know, atheists who are listening to this, because some of them are very reasonable people. But
well, some of them go, well, all religion sucks. They're all, you know, these priests are molesting kids, etc., etc. That just illustrates their point.
But communists will use atheists at any point they can, you know, for whatever goal, and just to get, you know, a religion out of society, mainly Christianity, they will use atheism. So, you know, atheism I don't think is that bad, because at least you're thinking. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, but there's, you know, atheism is very important.
It maybe you haven't committed yet. But what I just wanted to say, Steve, was, you know, people say to me, oh, why would all the elite, what's all this to do with pedophilia? Why? Okay, or I can understand the pedophilia bit, but why the Satanism bit? Why the Luciferian ritual bit? That doesn't make sense. Well, what people have to understand, this is why. Because Luciferianism is, you know, this is where these things have stemmed from in the beginning, from Luciferian doctrine, and pedophilia is and human sacrifice and cannibalism, and these practices are all part of that. They're all part of that. And funny, we're on Russia, and just the other day in the newspaper, you've got there was a man who, along with his pedophile and his 12-year-old victim, helped him axe murder this other guy together. They chopped him up. Then they cooked up and ate his brains. So this is what's manifesting, is what we're talking about. This is why another thing that was in the paper yesterday was a 2-week-old baby's fighting for its life after being raped by a bloke. So all these things happen, and we're trying. What I'm trying to say is that this is the roots of today's society, and, you know, you're getting the Luciferian left are making a run for it. They are now surfacing. So everything that I grew up with, which was hidden in the dark, now they're becoming overt.
Yep. And this is it. And I couldn't find a clearer example of, I guess, when we look at the Petrascus family, very left-wing, you know, I thought Leonys would be more, you know, I guess the way I'm programmed by society, it tells me that Nazism has more to do with the right wing than the left. That's not true.
Well, they say it's extreme right. That's what they say, but it's not.
Exactly. And so this is kind of what made it hard for me to understand the political motivations behind your perpetrators. So let's go into Leonys next. So I think I'd just like to add that Kypros was also a very famous, actor, and actors have a lot to do with ritual and ritual abuse. So
yes, I can add something there. So my perpetrators like John Bell, who was Australia's most famous Shakespearean actor, and he worked in London with the Shakespeare Company for a while. And all that crowd, you've got Bruce Spence and
Shakespeare.
Nicole Kidman. Well, Anthony Kidman was really into the arts as well in the background, and so was
Shakespeare.
Yeah,
we'll get into that and Rosicrucianism in a sec, because Shakespeare was either written by a Rosicrucian with understanding of all the occult ideas, and just acting itself. Like I've even heard John Bell, who will go into detail in a bit. He goes on about just ritual and how great acting is as a ritual.
Well, that's what I was trying to say, Steve. Is that and I did acting, and I did acting when I was at art school in Sydney. I actually was in acting classes with John Bell's daughter when she started out, and the sister was just starting out as playwrights, so Lucy and Hilary, I think it is. And anyway, really well. I got on really well with his daughter. We were very friendly. But they are all kind of dissociative techniques. They're occultic techniques, dissociation. If you can dissociate, that's the best thing for acting. And you can get into character, so you're sort of you're dissociating and leaving yourself as a vessel for all these spirits to enter you. And that's the best actors are the most demon possessed, to be honest. And there's a fellow who used to be in the show Eight is Enough who does a great job of exposing that in Hollywood. There's an actor who was, very popular in the 80s. I can't remember his name offhand.
We'll get to someone in a second, I think, who is actually a great example of that. People might know who it is, but we'll just keep going along the list. I'm going from the top down of all, the key names in the MK Ultra database. In the MK Ultra Australia database, who were central in what happened to Fiona, and also the MK Ultra network. But we're mainly looking at the occult side of things here, and we'll get into that. So acting is a very important part of the occultism, and I think people today see that in Hollywood, like all the major stars, like they're into Aleister Crowley or Scientology or whatever. Same thing in a lot of regards.
All the same crap, different flavors.
Yeah, exactly. And
you got Patricia. Don't forget Patricia Ann Conlon, the opera singer, and musician. And she was in all the music. She was in the music recitals and things with John Bell at Sydney University, and she was the big influence on me. And an appreciation of the arts.
So next we'll go to Leonys Petrauskas. Everyone's heard this name. So who was he? I mean, he was, brought up in Lithuania. His daughter has told me, I've met his daughter, and his daughter has told me that Leonys, didn't have a great relationship with his father. Maybe I don't believe that as much as she wants me to. And basically, was brought up, by, I guess, caretakers in the house who were strongly affiliated with the Jesuit order. He was sent to a Jesuit school. He was a, famous basketball or whatever. But the occult connections aren't exactly clear. And what I'm thinking is that, in his time that, he was trying to escape Lithuania after the war, his father was really starting to get some power in the Soviet Union. And I'm thinking that, and this is just a hunch, that Leonys could have been a Soviet spy. He went into the Nazis, became a doctor, got employed by them, and then was brought out to Australia because they thought he was a Nazi. And this is well known. ASIO and the Commonwealth Investigation Bureau, I think it was called at the time, they were bringing Nazis out. Like it was like a rat line. That it was called Project Matchbox. It was like Project Paperclip. This was just the Australian version. And all there was a journalist who uncovered it all in the National Archives by accident, and then they had to, basically just take the documents from him and say, look, we're classifying this, you can't read it. But we know that much, that it did exist. And
who was that journalist?
I don't know his name. I've got it somewhere, but I just don't know who it was. But it was pretty interesting. And so Leonys came out here, and I guess all our intelligence agencies thought, he was, maybe working with the Nazis more than the communists. And I'm sure they wouldn't have let him in if they knew he was a communist. Unless maybe we were infiltrated here, and we'll get to that in a moment. But yeah, I really do think that he had more to do with the Soviet Union the KGB, than, say, the Nazi Party. I mean, because the Nazis really didn't exist that much after the war. So the only sort of military, I think, that would, well, anyway, let's just forget about that now. So let's get into his occult connections. So when he came to Australia, and this is going to be hard not to mention this group, but he started off in the military hospital, but then he went to what they called a SOPA. So it was some lame name, but it was really called the Australian School of Pacific Administration. And basically it was like, an intelligence, a wartime sort of intelligence group that sort of turned into this like Commonwealth. I guess it was like they were kind of exploring the Pacific and stuff like this. And it was a military group. And that was, I mean, I've mentioned this in the MK Ultra Part 1, but the headquarters were directly next to, in the occultists' own words, the most important and key, building, organization in Australia's occult history, the occult hub of Australia, which was basically set up by what we would call the Illuminati. So the highest ranking Freemasons, the Theosophists, the Rosicrucians, they all came to this one and set up an organization. Basically, it was run by the Theosophical Society, this building, which people should look up and understand. Helena Blavatsky and all that sort of Luciferianism, so bad. But the Theosophists and all the Luciferians in Australia, the high-ranking, really occult Freemasons, including the Aleister Crowley groups, set up a hub right next to a SOPA, which Leonys was working for. And speaking of other occult connections to a SOPA, Camilla Wedgwood from the Huxley family, the Huxley-Darwin family, very important in MK Ultra. The most important family you'll need to know about understanding what the MK Ultra revolution was about. Anyway, she helped set that up. And her cousin was in Australia at the same time, setting up the Ordo Templi Orientis, the Aleister Crowley group that says they're not into Satanism, Luciferianism, or occult rituals, even though their own documents state that they are into killing animals. And how far is it to say that maybe a criminal within their group would want to kill a human too? That's what
I'm testament to that. So
yeah,
I'm a victim of the OTO, and I witnessed them committing the most heinous child sacrifice you could imagine. They committed the worst one, where they flayed the little 5-year-old blonde boy in the Great Hall of Sydney University. So they certainly are involved in human sacrifice.
Well, here's the thing about the OTO. The public group is full of plebs, and I don't think they kill kids. They want to. They probably would think it's okay, but I'm not going to say that the organization that self would.
Well, it's like the Freemasons. Yeah, people join the Freemasons thinking they're just getting into a social club of some sort. Yeah. And so the OTO, like we say, the headquarters are at Sydney Uni now, and people would join it thinking, well, my lecturer has invited me, so I'm going to do better in my classes if I join, or whatever. It's the same sort of thinking, right? And that's how they got members at Sydney University when I was young. And but it's a special invitation, and people are trying to look up to their, you've got these 18-year-old kids coming in and trying to get good marks at uni and make it in the world, and it's mainly through your connections at Sydney Uni that you gets your jobs.
Well, see, this is the thing. I mean, I think like it's sort of like an entry level group, and it's full of the weirdest kind of people. And look, I'm not saying that any of them who are public that I know about would do that. I don't think they're capable of that. But I think like the OTO is part of just this bigger idea. It's Aleister Crowley's ideas that are really just the most evil things in existence, apart from communism.
And Crowley talked about the benefits of sacrificing a young boy.
It says
boy.
It says pick a young, I think, blonde boy.
Blonde.
It's intelligent, and that makes the highest magical work out, something along those lines. But anyway, they'll come up again. They'll come up again down the line. But what else can I say about Leonys' occult connections? I mean,
So you're saying a SOPA that Leonys was working for, you're saying that the OTO set up?
No, I'm saying Camilla Wedgwood was part of a very occult family.
No, I'm saying who was next door. You're saying that this main occult organisation set up.
So apart from that, just to clarify, Camilla Wedgwood, wasn't known as a Satanist, but her cousin basically was one of the highest ranking members of the OTO, set the OTO up in Australia, while she's setting up a SOPA. SOPA was next to the highest, I guess, organization, the highest ranking organization, the most influential organization in Australia that brought the occult into Australia. And it was within walking distance, just down the road. And there wasn't much in Mossman at the time. So you had this big army base, an intelligence unit, which Leonys was working for. Camilla Wedgwood started, and then the Theosophical Society and their massive building in Aluka Road, Mossman, called the Manor, where all sorts of rituals were going on, and all the Freemasons in the Southern Hemisphere were meeting. So you had all these like Illuminati orders and things like that. People belonging to those things, they met there to plan how they would infiltrate Australia spiritually. And they set up things like the 2GB radio station that they wanted to theosophize Australia. And if you look at that, it's just real like, extreme left sort of crap. And it's just sort of working towards the same goals of Marxism in a lot of ways. And it was under, ASIO at the time wasn't such a bad organization. I mean, there's a lot of bad people in it. There's a lot of good people in it. But they really hated communists at that point. And I've read a lot of their documents available through the National Library, and they suspected that place of being a massive hub for just enemy spies, just planning to infiltrate Australia and gather intelligence. And I mean, it makes a lot of sense with what we know about Leonys, so there was something going on.
Tell everyone what a SOPA stands for.
Australian School of Pacific Administration, but it was also set up by, one of your other perpetrators there, John Kerr, who was a massive spook. And I think I should mention the most important in terms of occultism was James McAuley. He was basically an Australian, an ASIO agent, and he worked for the CIA, but he was a major intellectual in Australian history, and he was a very famous poet. And if you go to university, study like literature and writing and poetry, you understand who James McAuley is. He was a really bad guy, basically. And throughout his upbringing, he wrote of experiences where he would see this great white figure, he called it. So he was having these visions as a young kid, and I guess it basically led him to what they called the Liberal Catholic Church in Australia at that time. It was in Redfern. It was this little church, and it was super occult. I mean, this is a group that ended up sort of partnering with the Theosophical Society, Freemason groups. It was also the place where I think the first ritual or initiation of the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, happened. And just having a look at the Liberal Catholic Church in my web brain, it was, I think, headed by Charles Leadbeater, who was in charge of the Theosophical Society just down the road from SOPA. And also James Wedgwood, who was Camilla Wedgwood's cousin, who set up the OTO. So Camilla Wedgwood set up a SOPA, which was down the road from the Theosophical Society's headquarters in Mossman. So you've got Wedgwood and Leadbeater who were running the Theosophical Society, basically setting up the liberal Catholic Church, and then ASIO man who set up basically a SOPA is a member of the liberal Catholic Church. And so I think there's a lot of information that suggests that James McAuley may have been a member of the OTO as well. It's very possible. But, he's this, massive figure in Australian history, set up a SOPA, military intelligence guy, very powerful, came from University of Sydney. And this is what we'll get to. There's a big group of these radical, sort of left-wing, occult extremists. And yeah, he was running that. And just to add, like, he was the guy who brought Leonys to Australia or who helped Leonys get set up in Australia, was Vin Zigas. And, Vin was basically
Zigas. How do you spell Zigas?
Zigas. And then, like, that was basically Leonys's brother in Australia. And James McAuley was Zigas's son's godfather. So they were very close. So, yeah. But anyway, adding on to that, Leonys, I'll put pictures up on screen of what sort of rituals Leonys was into, that Fiona remembers, but he was very close to the Catholics.
Very. All the rituals,
yeah.
So many rituals were conducted in the Catholic churches and then the Freemasonry building. I mean, that Freemason headquarters down the road from Anthony Gibbons' place over on North Sydney, on the Pacific Highway, that burnt down. Remember it burnt down just after we shot Candy Girl?
When you came
they were worried we were going to go in there, and we would have gone there next, except it burnt down all of a sudden.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a sec. And I mean, yeah. So he was at University of Sydney as well. So he studied there. At the same time, all the other perpetrators and key figures were there. But I really don't know what to add in terms of the occult connections to Leonys. I mean,
apart from that, I saw him murder kids.
Yeah. Apart from that,
to Lucifer,
that he was heavily connected to, I guess, intelligence groups, and he was probably working for the KGB. That's all I can think of, and very, very hidden, very occult, underneath the radar. And I mean, you just have to look at his daughter, Christa. I've met Christa, basically went undercover to get a lot of information from her. And I feel really sorry for her because she's a victim of this, but she also was a perpetrator. And I don't...
Can I just say there, she's a perpetrator. She's the one, she was trained as a nurse by a medical assistant by Leonys. And she, Christa Petrauskas is the one who assisted in the abortion on me when I was a kid and a teen, and she's the one that I saw honey trap the victim on the beach, who was burnt at the stake. And we knew her as the Black sort of Widow, and her little trick was to lure guys, surfers down the beach to have sex with them, and then she would just then drug them because she had a needle on her, little small hypodermic needle, and she would drug them, and that's how we got a lot of victims.
And this is where it gets interesting with Christa, with the information that we have. So obviously,
and I gave all her details to the police. We had her address, mobile, because they said, "Oh, do you know where she might live?" I went bang, 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 bang. Cops, and they're like sitting there, and their eyes look like a stunned mullet with all the information we gave them.
And this is the thing, because and I'll just say to the viewers, like at the time, Fiona only knew Leonys Petrauskas as Dr. Mark, and then I had to piece it all together, and basically I grabbed all the information I could find out about the medical center that Fiona could remember, and and then I went through all the owners and directors, and I thought, hey, this Leonys Petrauskas guy, funny name, let's figure out who he was. Anyway, matched the description given to me by Fiona, like sort of medium to short, stocky build, sort of thinning hair, dark, was Slavic.
Oh, he was more wiry than stocky. He was like a basketball player, but a short basketball player.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like,
and he was young,
built.
looked young for his age up to a certain point. He looked really young for his age. He held his age well. And my mum met him, she remembered him. Oh, Dr. Mark, And she confirmed, he looked young for what his age was.
Yeah. And I mean, just fitted the description perfectly.
Ridiculous. The hair, the black hair that went down in the V sort of thing. And then I remember when you first sent me a photo of him and you said, oh, who's this? And I went, I'm thinking, oh, well, could that be, that looks like maybe the son of Leonys the son of Dr. Mark.
Yeah.
I thought maybe a son because it looked too young.
Yeah.
And I said, gee, that looks like, I did, didn't I? I said, that looks like Dr. Mark.
But also in your memory drawings that you recovered through therapy, there was also the snake slut, what you call the snake slut. That's the term you use to, I guess when you're processing the memory. That I'll edit that out, I guess, but I'll just put it up on screen. She was assisting Dr. Mark, and you didn't know who this was. You just thought she was a nurse. The work there. But if we look at Christa, we'll put her up on screen. I mean, she matched the perfect drawing that Fiona remembered in terms of description and the way she acted. And get this, right? So Christa was a massive occultist. She'll admit this. She says, "Oh, my father had nothing to do with it," but I don't believe it. So anyway, there's not much to say about her upbringing.
And do you know what? What about when I first was given certain photos of hers? I'd seen other photos.
Yep.
But it was these photos from the age where she was most active in my life.
That's it.
I was handed some photos from back then, and I said, and I'm looking, going, and then I just threw the laptop at Shane.
Yeah.
I just had this flash, and heat would come over my body when these happened. I said, "That's the nurse," and I just threw Shane's laptop at him.
Yeah.
And because I was so triggered, that was horrible. And I had seen photos of her and everything, but it was the photos of her from the time when she performed the abortion on me when I was 14, and the time when she committed those murders on the beach and things like that. They're the ones that triggered me, not the other ones.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the thing. I mean, also to add, like Shane Nagel, he was a guy who basically started this investigation, wanted to just record Fiona's story. I got along into it because I wanted to investigate ritual abuse in Australia, and I said, "Oh, hey, that's pretty cool. This Fiona chick, right? I'll investigate like a little bit of her claims because I just want to know what this whole ritual thing is."
So what did we do, Steve? We hired a car, drove around Sydney, and my daughter insisted on coming along. People go, "Why'd you take your daughter?" Well, she said, "Oh, I'm not going to miss out on all the adventure." And anyway, so she refused to stay home. Anyway, so she came along. So the four of us, we hired a car. It stank like cigarette smoke, so we had to swap cars. So that one was like dark blue or black or something. Oh, what's the only other car left? Lime green. So here we are doing this covert operation, and we end up going around Sydney. Next thing, we're chased by the military security guards at Holsworthy Army Base. Remember that? They chased us down the road and filmed us. And so that was the trip. That
was
Steve, Shane,
that was some pretty fun stuff. And Shane Nagel, he's a great guy. He really helped us out in all this and sort of recorded the Candy Girl documentary and stuff. So but he's busy doing his own thing now, and I still keep in touch with him, I guess, every now and then. So, but anyway, Christa, Shane infiltrated Christa's life, basically. I think Christa had the hots for Shane, and that helped, and spilled a bit too much information than she should have, but not much more than what is public and what you can figure out about it. So she grew up with Leonys in Papua New Guinea, and she knew basically, I guess, all the spook types, all the military types. So maybe she was connected in with it there. I don't know. But basically, when she came back to Australia, grew up, I guess a normal upbringing, she did mention to me that she was a victim of pedophilia and child pornography at an early age, which I found interesting. She said, and I don't want to get into her life, but she told me this, so whatever. She was, basically abducted, when she was like, really, really young. Photos were taken of her. She was used in child pornography, which is terrible. Maybe it explains some of, her occultism anyway. And that, so maybe that's a theme, but, maybe there's more to it. Maybe that's just a story to cover.
No, there is more to it. She was raised in incest.
Yeah.
And her and her father would have sex at rituals together. I saw it.
There we go. So that explains that. And going into the occult connections, this is where it gets really interesting. Okay, so firstly, I can figure out she was at the Satyananda Yoga Ashram. And if you've been following the Child Abuse Royal Commission, that was one of the major, I guess, places where some of the worst and like Luciferian satanic ritual abuse, black magic ritual abuse happened. So here we go. This is ABC. Victim recounts being raped during ritual at Satyananda Ashram. And this is not far from where she lives in the north suburbs of Sydney.
Hang on, I haven't heard of this.
I've told you briefly about it, but hang on.
But the Royal Commission. Are you saying the Royal Commission investigated it?
Yeah. They took this account. It was very, very credible. But I'll just get into it now. So the girl known as APR in the hearing moved to the ashram with her mother, father, and sister in the late 1970s. And I guess the abuse sort of happened around the mid 80s, the real bad stuff. And even Christa mentioned this to me. She was like, I got out of there before the shit hit the fan. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're part of the shit hitting the fan. But anyway, she recounts in this ABC article, I feel the entire ashram was groomed into a place of powerlessness. So it was like a mind control occult. So basically, this Satyananda, Saraswati was the head of the organization. People worship him like a god. It's all to do with, like, I guess, Eastern mysticism, Tibetan black magic, all that sort of stuff. But her allegation was she was raped, I think, and there was cutting with a knife, and there was chanting. She was made to take drugs, and there was she just said it was basically black magic. She was held down during the ritual by the Indian director, spiritual leader of the ashram. Cut between my breasts with a knife, licked the blood, threw it into the fire. Just black magic stuff. So this is not far. Christa was at this ashram. She was a Buddhist. She was actually.
I just, you know what? I'm really pissed off right now because, the Royal Commission. I took my case to the Royal Commission. I went to the first hearings in Brisbane, and they've done stuff all about my case. And here you've got that. They hold this up. The only reason that they've gone into this and mentioned this publicly is because it can be written off as a little bit culturally foreign. Let's face it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just some little weirdo, wacko, Australian, Indian, whatever.
Oh, hang on. I've got part of an email here from Christa to Shane, and I'm just going through it in the web brain. It's there. People can read it. Direct quote. I lived here for the best part of the year. The shit hit the fan in about 1986 or thereabouts after a murder. And she says it's now 2015. But, she was there. And she was there when she says it was a murder. Maybe it was connected to this sort of black magic ritual type thing. Probably it was. But yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I just
I'm just having a burst of anger here because the bloody Sutherland cops, Belinda Abdi, that I was told is involved in this, right? The cop in charge of my case shut my case down, even though they found that those satanic symbols, the eagle, the encircled eagle that I drew on the ritual banner, they found that engraved in some of the windows on the laundry. out in the garage, maybe outside. And the guy who bought my grandparents' house told me that.
Mm-hmm.
Cops raided the joint, found all this stuff, walked the streets like the good cop that took my statements. I'm not accusing her of anything. She just answers to a chain of command. They walk the bloody streets. They walk in there, they come in with cadaver dogs and six officers, and everyone in the streets knew what was going on in that house to some degree, or at least they knew it was weird. They knew kids were being abused, all this sort of stuff. So somebody knew something in that street.
Mm-hmm.
Fran, across the road, diagonal up the road to my grandparents, we heard from that Pam that we ran into a McDonald's in Engadine, that Fran, knew, and she knew Fran and told me later on, Fran remembers me and remembers the house and remembers what was, knew Helen.
Yeah.
Anyway, so all this goes on, and then what? What's happened since then? It's 2018, nothing.
Yeah.
And we have the keys to the greatest crime ring in Australian history.
Mm.
And what are the cops doing about it? And the Royal Commission, disgusting, filthy cover-up they are, right?
Mm.
They've got this information and they're not linking it up to what I gave them and what I've published since.
No, they don't want to do that. That's too much work. We only take the responses and then we work to cover up what they actually remember. So that's basically what the Royal Commission is.
Tell me what this SAT place is. Just spell it out, because people.
So it's SAT, S-A-T, Yananda. So Y-A-N-A-N-D-A, Satyananda Yoga Ashram. And it's the name of the guru who set it up. But, Christa was into all these sort of black magic, I guess, Tibetan Buddhist groups. She was very close with Ayakima. Her real name is Ilse Liederman. And she was, a massive, Buddhist, I guess, really influential in the Western states of the United States. And she owned what was called a Buddhist cooperative in Queensland with Christa. But she helped set up, I guess, parts of Buddhism and all that sort of crap, in Australia, pretty early on. But anyway, so we know that she was into that, but she even admitted to me and Shane that she was very close with the Rosicrucian order. So
you saw the letter.
Yeah. I took a photo.
And I just want to say that I also want people to be very clear that Christa Petruscus knowingly, willingly handed over a whole bunch of documents and photos and the originals of her father's passport and Nazi papers, right? Handed them over, and we know why. It was to lure me into going to her house and visiting. She was trying to get my trust.
But also to cover up that she and her father were flaming communists, and I'll get to why she was a communist in a second. But she acts like a spy. And I mean, and I'll get into the connections that kind of make me think that. But sorry to cut you off, but just going through this connection, she admitted to me that she was basically she knew, and she said the head guy of the Rosicrucians in Australia. People need to understand who the Rosicrucians are. This particular group is called Amorc. So I think it's the ancient mystic order.
How do you spell that?
So people, if you just Google Amorc, so AMORC, you'll find the group. And Aleister Crowley was a part of it. And you need to understand who the Rosicrucians are. Historically, they've been completely associated with the Illuminati, the Gnostics, as far as I can tell. They're just involved with revolution throughout history. It's the same group. It's the same type of people that, Lenin adored and said, this Illuminati group, it's great. It's all about revolution, rebelling against God. That's who the Rosicrucians are. Scholars of I've read university lectures on who the Rosicrucians are, and they just openly say it's a satanic or Luciferian organization. It's based on real occult Freemasonry. It's a Freemasonic group. And if you look at the relationship between the heads of Freemasonry in this country, they're very close friends with the heads of the Rosicrucian order in Australia. So it's a very, very important Freemasonic group. Anyway, I'll just
Well,
mention as well.
this is what no, but just on that, Steve, I just want to say that all these groups meet at the top, right? It's like a pyramid, a hierarchy of power.
It's
and
a criminal
all these
organization. Yeah.
It's like Tim Roy, right? A victim of 2GB pedophiles. So you're mentioning the 2GB station, and there's some very prominent pedophiles who have worked, and who are still in showbiz, who have worked for 2GB. And I just have to say, every one of those radio announcers, including Gordon Moyes, who was the famous evangelist, the Wesleyan evangelist that travelled around Australia, and I met him as a kid and had lunch with him, right, at the Tweedheads Church of Christ, or I should say Church of Satan. He was very prominent, and he was a Freemason, huge Freemason. No one knows that. And Tim Roy is a friend of mine, and he's a victim of all of this as well, the same stuff I've been through. But he was sexually abused by everyone at 2GB, including Gordon Moyes and John Laws and Alan Jones and all that lot, right? So, and Alan Jones, he was arrested in England for pedophilia. Yeah. So, and he's still on television in Australia, still hailed as this great, entertainer. So all these people, what I'm trying to say is, all these groups, people try and say that, I know Tim Roy would say, oh, it's all Freemasons. It's all Freemasons.
Yeah.
It's all Freemasons. And then someone online told me, oh, Fiona, you're not pointing at the real leader of all of this, the real problem. It's the Pope, the Catholic Church. Oh, yeah. I just need to say, the real problem here is the Luciferians, right? Yep. And they're at the top of the chain. It's not the Pope, it's the Luciferians. I'll tell you who's in charge, the Rothschilds. They're the most I knew them as the most powerful Luciferian dynasty in the world. They're the ones behind all of this. They're more powerful than the royal family, I believe. They interbred with the royals, many decades ago. Yeah. And, so this is all these groups, the Rosicrucians, the Jesuits, who are the nastiest. They're the Jesuits are the Luciferian Catholics, okay? That's the branch that are really the Luciferians and do all
Yeah, well, the founder was like a member of the Spanish Illuminati. I mean,
they're all linked to the Luciferians. So you've got a lot of good Catholics out there, right? Yeah. Who have no clue about this stuff. So I'm not saying it's every Catholic, but all these groups, they're all just offshoots of the same crap. So Freemasonry, OTO, Jesuits, all this. It's not just one group that's in control. The ones in control,
I tell you what,
the Luciferians up the top.
A good example, I mean, the OTO in their handbook, which they give out to the public, it says they take all the teachings from the Jesuit order, from the Rosicrucians, and they combine it all together. And all these groups are just taking ancient knowledge and trying to gain the most power from it possible. So it's they're just different mafia organizations that are trying to learn the tactics required to gain the most power.
And the mafia dynasties were established by British intelligence. And that's
they all copied Freemasonry in their structure, with the lodges and everything. That's what the all the Italian Sicilian mafias are based on. It's Freemasonry. That's all it is.
Yeah. And they were established by British intelligence, and which everybody has to know that British intelligence, CIA answer to British intelligence, ASIO answer to British intelligence. All these operations, Mossad, all these secret services, all they are the Luciferian police force.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, it's pretty accurate. So next, just following up on Christa, so she was into all these weird Buddhist groups, and she also was, in at the Theosophical Society, which we think her father was too. And I forgot to mention that Leonys was part of this new Australian cultural association where new immigrants would get together and network and stuff. But it was actually all the events were run at the Theosophical Society Hall in the city, and there were just a bunch of Theosophists who ran it. So I thought that's pretty interesting because the SOPA was next to...
Because what did I say though, Steve? I always said that my grandparents who were, Nazi war criminals, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Helen was in the Gestapo, and Peter used to murder Jews for a living in Lublin, in the death camp.
Yeah.
And they came to Australia, and I said they socialised with all the other Nazi war criminals that found refuge in Australia, and they were all occultists, and they had orgies and screwed around. Like Helen's got three kids to three different fathers, and all this sort of stuff. And my father remembered all the orgies and stuff. He used to tell me about them. So, it's consistent with what I told you before you even researched all this stuff.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. I mean, Lithuania itself has a big sort of pagan religion, like behind it, more so than like Christianity. I think is it's mainly now. But like, I know someone who's talking to a Lithuanian recently, and they're like, "Oh no, I'm really getting into the old religion that we have here, the pagan religion that we have here, and all that sort of stuff." They got a long history of that. But
well, there's a resurgence of the pagan arts and the pagan culture and religion and whatever all around the world in the last 30 years.
That's it.
Huge everywhere.
Yeah, but I think
it's just Luciferianism coming up.
Yeah, that's it. And like going on from that Theosophical Society connection, I mean, Christa was like saying, I was there. I was at, the headquarters in the city. It was a big part of my life. And, I know all the Rosicrucians in Sydney. They all, they're part of the Theosophical Society, like the major ones are at least. So it's a major occult hub in Sydney. And, so just another coincidence there that, Leonys was connected to it. Then like his intelligence unit was like directly next to the Theosophical Society's head of the Southern Hemisphere and all those occultists and all that sort of stuff. But then, like, Christa spent a lot of time with this James McGarry guy, Dr. James McGarry, and he like has this. It's like a cult, basically, in the New South Wales North Coast, and he runs the Academy of Esoteric Sciences and the Academy of Human Sciences, and it's all to do with like hypnosis. And basically, like, I don't think he tells his clients and customers that it's just all mind control, and they're all buying into it. So, Christa comes.
What's his name again?
Dr. James McGarry, and it's funny because I know that when we started, talking to Christa, and she kind of knew something was up at one point, and kind of knew that we were not just there to learn about her, but we suspected she was part of something bigger. We know straight away that she was on the phone to James McGarry telling him something. And then after that, like within a couple of hours, he deletes all his online accounts, Facebook accounts, hides everything. So I found that pretty interesting. Anyway, people can go to his website. I can put the pictures up on screen. But he's like dressing up in these weird like Luciferian robes and like magic wands, rituals. He's into hypnosis and all this stuff. He's a bit of an occultist himself. And she spent like a fair amount of time here, and McGarry knew like some pretty influential Rosicrucians and stuff like that. So he's in that group as well. So wherever Christa goes, she's just involved with occultism. And, she tried to really play that down when we were talking to her, but there's definitely something to it. So, and another thing, she's a massive like leftist. She, if she was younger, she'd just be basically Antifa. That's who she is. Like, she met with Jim Cairns and Junie Morosi, which is a huge connection because if my memory serves me correctly, Junie Morosi or Jim Cairns was like a communist spy and pretty much got outed in his time in politics, I'm pretty sure. So I'm just going to bring up his Wikipedia page because like this is from stuff that I was covering like a couple of years ago. But he was prominent in the Labor Party and was briefly deputy prime minister in the Whitlam government. He was, really outspoken against the Vietnam War, but he had all these, he was he was connected to the Communist Party. He was basically just working against Australia, you know, and then Junie Morosi as well, his lover, or like yeah, he had a short-term relationship with her. Just looking at her, but basically she was a spook too, and yeah, so she had a long meeting with these two, and she doesn't really go into detail about what it was in the letter that I have written from her to her sister. But anyway, Jim Cairns is interesting because he started the counterculture in Australia. Really, he kicked it off. He was a Marxist, and then like he's into all this sort of weird occult stuff, as well, which is really interesting for a politician who was briefly deputy prime minister. I mean, what's going on there? So, very interesting there. So, yeah, Junie worked for the CIA at one point. She was like a spy for them, but she was a bit of a leftist as well. She was a Marxist as well. So they were really heavily allied with, I guess, probably the KGB socialist intelligence groups at that time. So anyway, so I've pretty much like covered most of her connections that are interesting, but also got to go to her daughter, Kasana Osborne, because this is interesting. I mean, I don't know much about Christa's daughter, so Leonys's, granddaughter, but the photos that I did find of her in Christa's house, while I was there and Shane was talking to her, she's wearing satanic pentagrams. She's dressed up looking like she's about to go to a satanic ritual. She's got pentagrams drawn on her hands and putting them up on screen. Now, she was a Satanist at one point. She was a Luciferian at one point. What's going on? Why is she wearing pentagrams? Why is she looking so dark? Why is she looking like, I guess the best way to describe it would be an emo, like that fad thing that was going on for a couple of years back.
Beyond emo.
Yeah. And she's wearing like pentagram necklaces. So and she's in Christa's house at the time when those photos are taken. So I'm pretty sure Christa's taking those photos of her daughter, of her like, I don't know, just getting her daughter ready for a ritual or something. But she obviously had some influence with the occultism over Kasana's life as well. So there you go. Like you got, okay, so Kypros Petrauskas, Leonys' father, is a really influential figure in the Soviet Union, massive communist. There we go. So and then Leonys himself works for the Nazis, gets hired by Australian intelligence, is into all these occult groups. Fiona's main perpetrator. Fiona remembers him at the Luciferian rituals at Catholic churches, all sorts of places. And then Christa just somehow becomes, a Rosicrucian, is involved with all these ritual abuse organizations, is involved with the Theosophical Society, is involved with dark occultism. Personally told me she was hanging around like, real heavy Satanist types. And then her daughter is, dressing up as a Satanist and like, just drawing pentagrams all over the place. That's a lot of evidence there. And Christa's, connected to like all these communist spies and all this sort of stuff. And then is at the center of like, all this, extreme leftists and revolutionary type figures as well. It's just really weird. So yeah, a lot of information there, but let's figure out where to go next. I think we'll just go with Kidman.
Yeah.
Kidman. Yeah. And then I guess after that, like after I go through Nicole, because there's heaps here as well. Like,
oh, everyone loves Nicole. Do Nicole.
Yeah. So, we've been rattling on about some, dodgy Lithuanians for a while, but let's get to some Australians here. So yeah, Dr. Anthony Kidman, the guy who just, randomly fell downstairs apparently, which was first reported, like less than a month after Fiona complained to the relevant authorities about him being a pedo and a Satanist, just fell down some stairs. And then later it was a heart attack. And then later it was unnatural causes.
No, hey, the very first reports, because obviously I was following it at the time.
Yeah.
And various reports went up, and next thing they disappeared off the internet. The first reports where he jumped off a balcony.
Huh. Yeah.
in Singapore at his daughter's hotel, mind you.
Yeah. And
Tony Kidman's hotel in Singapore.
the most credible like account I found came from like a fund, like I mean, it was like a wealthy sort of like gentleman's club he was at, and there was a doctor who saw it and said like he just began like choking. I think even like sort of foaming at the mouth, like it was something unnatural, and the doctor was like, "No, that wasn't a heart attack. That wasn't a natural death."
Poisoned.
Yeah, something like that. He was eating and then he just dropped dead. So I'd say something was in that food. But he could have been poisoned beforehand. You never know. But it was really unnatural the way he died.
Well, the thing is though, how does that fit in with what we're saying? The day of his funeral, I had some journalists, a journalist and her photographer, come round, and she hired a makeup artist and all this stuff, and she told me that day that her paparazzi contact, who used to work as a bodyguard for Nicole Kidman, turned paparazzi, he had contact still with the other bodyguards, that worked for Nicole, and they said that Kidman had been on suicide watch since my reporting his child abuse to the New South Wales Health Board, etc. And so, who knows what the truth is? I don't know. Well, see, I know that he would have had to have fronted up before the Grand Council that used to meet in McLaren Hall at Sydney University. So the Luciferian elite of Australia, that's their headquarters, Sydney Uni, and they would meet there and have like a court case, and he would be tried and convicted, and he would have to answer. So the number one rule of Fight Club is there is no Fight Club, and he'd stuffed up, and my programming had broken down. So it can be, he would have been, I know because I sat in on these hearings, right? Yeah. Anyway, so he, when I was a kid, similar ones, he would have gone before them, have to give answer to the charges, and then they would have pronounced upon him death, and either he would have to kill himself or be killed. So I don't know what happened after that. I do know he died, though. I do know that he died.
Well, he knew a lot, and I'm guessing like you were credible, had a lot of information backing you, and if you got him,
I wasn't the only one, Steve. My therapist told me I wasn't the first to report him to the health board.
Wow. And I mean, if that unraveled with all your revelations as well, I mean, how far could it?
And all the files, if we pulled all the other complaints from the health board files.
Because and people, I encourage people to watch like the MKUltra Part 1 to understand like the connections behind him, and like he was obviously connected heavily with the CIA and doing work for them, and if that came out, who knows what else we'd know. Like it's just
the whole thing would have unraveled, and that MKUltra Part 1, what Steve's talking about is all of Steve's research that you'll find on my blog sites now.
And like that is important to cover, because we're not going to cover like what Anthony Kidman was doing with the CIA and those groups, like in terms of mind control and all that sort of stuff, but just over his like occult connections. But yeah, you need to watch that, because like if we got him in a courtroom, with what we know now, and I guess what other victims might have said, it would have just totally blown this thing wide open. But so the reason why he died. But like, look, where do I start with this guy? I mean, the Kidman family is probably one of the wealthiest families in Australia. They were the biggest landowners in Australia. Like all the farms, all the major pieces of land, they were owned by the Kidman family. So he came from a pretty wealthy family in North Sydney as well. And his whole family were in the Catholic Church. And they were mainly Jesuits. They grew up around a Jesuit church, so attending the Jesuit church. Nicole later got married by that same Jesuit priest, etc. So the Jesuits are a big part of the Kidman family. And, we mentioned the Jesuits before, and, the Spanish Illuminati and all those spiritual practices. And it's now, if you look at Pope Francis, he's a Jesuit, and just look at him. He's a massive Marxist, pedophile. He talks about Jesus Christ being weak, Lucifer being more powerful. I mean, what more do you want? If you want to understand what the Jesuit order has become, there's a lot of good Jesuits out there too. I mean, it is called the Society of Jesus, but because of that, I think they want control of that. They want to misrepresent Jesus in the worst way possible. That's why. But basically, yeah, it's a big occult organization.
Well, they're like the Jesuits are like the Catholic mafia.
Yeah, and like even if you read like one of their founding documents, it's like they specifically mention like they would be happy. So I have to edit that out. Like even in their founding documents, they specifically mention that they would be happy to kill an unborn child or like a newborn child to protect their order's secrets or something like that. I'll put the exact quote up on screen, but and I'll find it. But like it sounds pretty evil to me. And I don't know if you look at them all through history and the Jesuits. I mean, like they're always somewhere in history like I don't know. They set up churches on all the occult burial grounds and stuff like this. They hoarded all the gold, hoarded all the treasure, hoarded all the artifacts and stuff like that. So very powerful. There was those spies too in like the old governments as well. So they'd be gathering information and assassinating people as well. So, but anyway, that's who the Kidman family were. That's what they were based on. And just like with the occult connections, I mean, Kidman was at the University of Sydney. Like we know that was a major occult. 50s and 60s, and like.
And he was there at the same time as Leonys Petrascus, and later John Bell and Patricia Ann Conlon, who was the Grand Dame who trained me. And Victor Chang, the famous heart surgeon who was actually in charge of the trafficking of human body parts for Asia and the CIA, and he was a serial killer basically. So all of them, you'll find that most of my perpetrators attended Sydney University together at some stage. There was some kind of overlap. And so, Conlon, Patricia Ann Conlon's husband was very close mates with Anthony Kidman, and they were in the same bloody classes, chemistry and everything together.
Yeah, that's one thing I didn't mention in part one was Patricia Conlon, because that gets into the occult bit. But yeah, Kidman was very close with Telford Conlon, and he's interested in occultism a bit too, but we'll probably get into that later. But like Kidman,
she could have her own show. Yeah,
yeah.
Patricia.
Yeah, there's a lot on her, and ties in with the SOPA as well, and the heads of University of Sydney. So, but just with I think that charm that you drew from memory of that Kidman took around to
the Eastern Star.
Yeah, like it's based on, like, I guess, Kabbalah, magic and sort of stuff like that, whatever it is. And yeah, he carried around that charm with him that you remember, and used the same colors in the rituals and stuff like that.
Well, and he all he had to do was wave that around. He used that as his MK Ultra unethical hypnosis, sort of trigger. And see what Kidman did was, my colour programming, my MK Ultra colour programming was established by Dr. Jolyon West at Dulce. So West, Giddinger and Aquino were the pioneers of modern MK Ultra after McAuley, who was the White Rabbit. They're the ones who did it for the American government. McAuley trained Aquino, of course, but West laid the colour programming, the foundation colour programming, so it would hold up, cards of colour, and then there would be a recording saying, white, red, all this sort of thing. But what Anthony Kidman did, which I could never work out, and it dawned on me, he, at Chelmsford Private Hospital, which was famous for Harry Bailey and deep sleep and all that, he took me there, and Harry Bailey was there, and so was Petrascus, and Kidman were there. And Kidman stuffed around with the original programming and overlaid this stupid pentagram on top of the colour programming. That was him. He had this thing for this Eastern Star, and then he overlaid it so that he could use that charm you're talking about, the pendant, the Eastern Star pendant with the 5 colours. You know, what? Well, you got white. There's black in the middle, and then you got white, red, yellow, green, blue as the you know, the star arms, the points. Yeah, that's where that came from. So he's the one who, so that's the background to that. And that's why he died, because that's what broke down.
Yeah. And see, like, I don't know, just coincidentally, down the road from where, you know, Nicole went to school, just not far from where he lived, there was an Order of the Eastern Star chapter, Masonic Lodge, number 193. And that was, you know, just basically not down the road from where Kidman worked, where he grew up, and where his house was. And, you know, that's pretty interesting because there weren't many Eastern Star like lodges and chapters. You know,
just explain to people, Steve, just explain the difference between, a regular Freemason lodge down the road and, there's an Order of the Eastern Star Freemason lodge down the road. What's the difference?
Well, like, I'm pretty sure like other Masonic groups may have used it, but this was like known as mainly just an Eastern Star Lodge up until like the mid 80s. So they'd been there for a long while, and I think it was like the major group that was there. And yeah, they use the exact same star, you know, just a little bit different, but that same star is what they use, that they painted on the walls. The charms and pendants that they had were the exact same thing. So you know,
find some photos from inside that place?
No, I haven't. I'm still yet to go there. It'd be interesting to do that.
Well, we can't. They burnt it.
Yeah, well, there's got to be something left. Like, yeah, well, only part of it burnt down, but it was interesting that like someone tried to burn it down, like not long after that you were in Sydney, but yeah. So anyway.
So because people often equate Order of the Eastern Star Freemasons with women.
Yeah, there are women members of that order, so that's what makes it different from most Masonic groups. Yeah, they do allow women.
That's where Patricia Ann would have come into it, because she grew up near Kidman too, on that north side.
Yeah, it's true. So could have been part of the same group, and like having a look. You know, Kidman also spent time after. You know, he was at University of Sydney at St. Elizabeth's, and you know, St. Elizabeth's was not only just a CIA hospital, but it was also, you know, set up by really high-ranking Freemasons, and it's where, you know, L. Ron Hubbard was also like studying, involved with the OSS. So there was sort of a lot of occult connections there as well. Just having a look at what else I can see. I mean, I'll probably edit this bit out when I'm doing it there. But yeah, I mean, Kidman himself went to Jesuit high school. Just having a look at the other connections.
Which high school was that?
That was St. Ignatius. Was it?
Because Patricia Ann Conlon also, or Patricia Ann Carden, which she was known as, she went to a Catholic high school as well. All the Catholic high schools.
Yeah, it was a Jesuit school, I think, for girls. And this one he went to was, I think, St. Ignatius.
And she was taught. What I found was she was taught by a Conlon at that high school, mentored and taught by a Conlon at that school that she was at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Conlons have got links to teaching at those schools.
Sure, for sure.
That's just something I found when, you know, you hit me with, hey, I found Ronnie. This is the whole thing people have to understand. I just knew them by their code names, a lot of these people.
Yeah.
And then bloody Steve comes along and says, I think I might have found her. And like next thing, you know, I'm thrown up and I'm in therapy, you know, in a fetal position, you know, shaking and that. Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah.
No worries.
Like Steve found everything. Like really, I didn't know these people other than by their like I said, their code names. But didn't I give good, accurate descriptions? Like when I told you about all these people, I told you, well, I think they lived here, they had a farm here, but they did this as a job, but also this, and this, and I can't decide whether this, like Patricia Ann, was she a teacher? No, she was a musician. No, she was an opera singer. No, she was this and that. And then we found out she was all 10,
Yeah.
And that's
and
how
this
it
is
was.
the thing. Like, it's a shame people can't understand what I went through, because I know, what you're saying is true, because I went through, in order of you just not having any names, not having, all the details, and then just finding everything that you described exactly how you said it was, accurate descriptions, and uncovering this in a sequence which, is impossible to make up, for you to know all this, and then for me to figure it out in the way I did. There's just no doubt that you're telling the truth.
We've got all the email exchanges, Steve,
Yeah.
covering that over
Well,
the
like,
years,
I can't,
and everything as it unfolded.
there's some things which I just can't prove, like that you're saying, but it doesn't matter, because I've seen enough, especially with the connections in Sydney, and from my own experiences, some I don't even want to say, because people wouldn't believe them. That you are telling the truth 100%. Like, and there's some things that you say that I can't understand, that I can't believe, but I know you're a victim of a satanic cult in Sydney involving the Petrascuses and the Kidmans and the University of Sydney and other occult groups that I've mentioned. There is no doubt that you are. So, I mean, tying it into this as well, I guess one thing that's really occulted about Kidman and satanic Luciferian was his involvement in a play called The Pillowman. And this is a really weird play. So not only
Called the what?
The Pillowman.
Oh, The Pillowman. Yeah, I remember this. Yeah.
And so, it's interesting because it's done in conjunction with John Bell's theatre, which used to be called the Nimrod Theatre. And look up Nimrod, because he's very influential in Masonic history and stuff like that.
Well, Nimrod is the one, just to interject, Nimrod has many names, but that's the one they're trying to resurrect.
Yeah.
That's their god that they're trying to resurrect. And they're using CERN and, all these methods. Like years ago, I knew that that's what they were trying to do. That, hail Nimrod, and they're trying to bring him back.
Yeah, so I mean,
and they're getting DNA samples from Egypt and this and that. I don't know. They're going all over the shop trying to find, and then that was part of why they were looking for weapons of mass destruction in the East. They were looking for all the clues in the formula and the DNA bits, because parts of him were scattered all over the joint, apparently. Yeah. And that's what they've been trying to do, is piece him back together again.
Mm. And so with this theatre that used to be called the Nimrod Theatre, he basically helps find and assists in this play called The Pillowman. And it's about the tale, I'm just going off the Wikipedia page here, a tale of Carturian, a fiction writer living in a police state who was interrogated about the gruesome content of his short stories. And there's similarities to a number of bizarre child murders occurring in his town. So this is like, in a way, this is Kidman's story he's sponsoring. And it's about, a fiction writer who's interrogated about the gruesome content of his short stories, and there's similarities to a number of bizarre child murders in his town. So maybe that's a big parallel there. And basically the story, goes on about, this writer who's a suspect in all these child murders. And I think in one of the acts, they crucify a young boy.
Nice.
And it's similar to the
ritual in the Great Hall at Sydney Uni that Anthony Kidman presided over, where they're dressed in OTO Eastern Star robes.
Exactly.
And that's the OTO Order one.
The memory drawing that you had, that you remember in the Great Hall. The Great Hall is something I forgot to mention as well, I guess in relation to Kidman, but also to Sydney Uni, I'll mention later, but that's for all the major.
the Great Hall at Sydney Uni is
No,
charged.
it's a Masonic hall. That's originally what it started as. It's a Freemasonic hall. That's where all the big rituals happen, or happened, because it's not used as one now. But it was the hall in Freemasonry.
Not since we outed them a few years ago. It won't be used again.
Yeah. Well, I think it was a little bit before.
Not charged
There's no
anymore.
way, that they would use that now. Jeez. Yeah. So, if you've got groups like the OTO at that Sydney Uni, I'm sure they're going to conduct their Masonic rituals in there.
Well, it's like, who's that Kylie chick that was in the handbook of the OTO?
Oh, we'll mention that in a bit.
No, I was just going to say, because she works for the ABC, but then we outed them, and suddenly you said they're all sacked or something, or they all left. Yeah, I'm just saying. We can go into that detail later, but the parallel is, what on earth has happened at Sydney Uni since we put all over the internet that they're all involved in, killing and eating kids?
Yeah, well, I mean, the leader of the OTO in Australia was working at Sydney Uni, and not long after all that Pizzagate stuff, came up, and then people were picking up your story and all the OTO members in Australia. I mean, he just leaves, and no longer.
What was his name?
Stephen King, Stephen J. King.
Stephen King.
Yeah, with
a
PH.
V or a PH?
PH, just like the weirdo writer. Author, yeah. So, some inspiration from his parents there. But yeah. And so, I guess it's weird because this play is basically a ritual, and it's about killing children. It's about a writer, so maybe Kidman himself being behind the play, and this is about a writer, interrogated about the gruesome content of his short stories, similarities to a number of bizarre child murders. So not very usual. A boy being crucified, just like what happened in the Great Hall that Fiona remembers. So there's a massive parallel there. I mean, the coincidences of that. I mean, and not only that, like, I remember, like, you describing Kidman's house to me, and it's not exactly easy to find with public information, and you knew exactly how it was inside. And I remember getting all the photos from like the real estate and being like,
realestate.com. Woo!
Yeah, and you're just describing it perfectly. There was a few things different. Like, I think, like, you may have been confused about when you went upstairs and when you went downstairs, but you described the rooms perfectly. Like, and the pool and everything and the layout of the house.
Yeah.
Just, you had to have been there.
The concrete basement thingy.
Yeah. You were definitely in Kidman's house at one point. There's no question for me.
There was a basement there.
Yeah. There's something like, a dark room that you were kept in. And they have plenty of those. So anyway, my voice is just starting to go now. Anyway, so we've done nearly 2 hours, I think. But I think we'll go into Nicole.
Finish on Kidman or do you want to go into Patricia Ann?
We'll go to Nicole next. So basically, like, Anthony Kidman himself, like, really wasn't a public figure, and there's not a whole lot known about him apart from his research side. So it's hard talking about the occult stuff, but I mean, it just becomes so evident in his daughter, just like Leonys. Okay, so here we go from the start. Everyone who knows who Nicole is, like, we don't need any introduction. But basically, she came to fame from a woman called Elizabeth Mullin. Now, this is just astounding because Elizabeth Mullin is a victim, admittedly, of satanic ritual.
Liz Mullin, as she's known, Liz.
Mullin.
And I've got some. And just before I forget, I'm friends with a retired therapist who worked there, and I've got a lot of inside garb from Liz Mulliner's, Heal for Life retreat, and and I also know victims who have been there. So I've got a lot of dirt on this Luciferian hoe, but continue, Steve.
Yeah, okay, but yeah, she openly admits, that she was a victim of satanic ritual abuse by her father, Stephen Hopkinson, who was in the Church of England over in England, where she's from. And basically, she is a massive influential figure in acting and theatre, very close with John Bell, who you mentioned before, we'll get into later. And she's in the theatre crowd, part of the same theatre that Anthony Kidman set up that child murder play with, mirroring his own murder, as you remember, Fiona. And then she just somehow starts casting Nicole into all these films, and she gets really famous all of a sudden. And then Liz Molnar goes up and starts the Heal for Life satanic ritual abuse that you just mentioned, Fiona. And so she's taking care of all these satanic ritual abuse victims.
Cleaning up.
Yeah. So like
the cleaner job.
The reason why Nicole is famous is because of a satanic ritual abuse victim.
Because of Liz Molnar.
Yeah.
She's her original agent who discovered and promoted Nicole Kidman.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think that started with
and Steve, Liz was in Bathurst at the time of that ritual.
Yeah, well, there was a movie, The Right Hand Man, that was being filmed the same time while there was a ritual going on in Bathurst. But I think we'll cover that later because it's just so big. I'll have to go into it in its own. Like Bathurst is one whole unit with the occultism and everything behind it.
And today, as we record, the Bathurst races are on.
Yeah. So
today's October the what?
Yeah, it was on October 6th, but it landed on the Sunday landed on a 6th back in 1985.
So Sunday, October the 7th, and this is the date of one of the worst rituals I ever attended.
Yeah.
And my birthday is this month, and Halloween is this month, and Halloween goes for ages. This is Halloween preparation is now in the Luciferian world. So go on.
Yeah, but like casted Nicole in 5 Mile Creek at the start, and then really got her into the limelight. But I mean, everyone knows Nicole from Eyes Wide Shut. The satanic ritual movie, basically, where everyone's in an orgy, wearing like chanting Luciferian chants and all that sort of stuff. But like even earlier, I mean, that Liz Molnar connection's just huge. But she went to school, North Sydney Girls High School, which is like a block from the Eastern Star Lodge. So that's interesting in itself. Growing up around, John Bell's Nimrod Theatre as well. And I mean, her mother was a very well-known feminist at Sydney Uni. I would probably call her a communist.
What's her name? Judith or something?
Her mother was Janelle. Yeah.
Janelle.
So again, we've got like this radical leftist mother, feminist, communist. And I forgot to mention like Kidman himself. When we're talking about the occult, we need to mention like the left-wing connections as well. Kidman was like a massive, I guess he was, I guess you could say like a communist, but he was really promoting that whole like that environmentally friendly serfdom. Like I think he was part of the Sustainable Population Australia Party. It was like reduce Australia's population.
Kill
communism's great. Yeah, just control
kill all the Christians and Jews. That's sustainable.
Yeah. And so like again, like just really hardcore leftist. And Nicole herself as well, working with the UN. But just looking at some of her movies that she's in, I mean, the occultism becomes clear. Not only that, but her involvement in the Church of Scientology. And this is where we need to understand, like, L. Ron Hubbard was a member of the OTO. Again, the OTO pops up. And, L. Ron Hubbard, who founded the Church of Scientology, was doing black magic rituals with, what's his name?
Parsons?
Jack Parsons, to basically summon the Antichrist. So, your average kind of guy ain't doing that sort of stuff, and here's L. Ron Hubbard just trying to summon the Antichrist, casually. Sets up the Church of Scientology. Nicole becomes a member of that, I think, through Tom Cruise. But she goes to him.
It doesn't matter. That was just a Luciferian arranged marriage.
Exactly.
To cover Tom Cruise's pedophilia and gay lifestyle. He was just a handbag. But this is interesting. Nicole, you're one of at least two sources that told me that you knew Nicole was not a full female. Why don't you tell everyone about your aunt? Is it Aunt Mary?
Well, my auntie Liz,
Liz.
yeah, it was well known at the hospital. She works there, but yeah, basically said, like I'm not into the whole like thing that Nicole's a man, but
No.
I just don't get it.
Hermaphrodite.
Yeah, but there's something up with it, you know. Anyway, like my auntie Liz was like, you know, and she's head of midwifery. Okay, so she's got to know what's going on when
She's head of
someone's
midwifery where?
at the Royal Women's Hospital in Randwick.
Okay.
And basically, she said, and the gossip and the talk of the town was, you know, Nicole can never have kids. And I remember, like, my auntie speculating that she was a hermaphrodite. Like, they just said, like, it's not possible.
Well,
Something like that.
she was assistant to the obstetrician gynae who examined Nicole Kidman.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Like, so they just said, look, we think she's a hermaphrodite. There's no way she's going to have kids. And that's all I heard. That, and I just found it interesting when I heard someone say that. You know, so maybe there
Well,
is.
I was in giving my police statements,
Yep.
and the cop there, we got onto the bit about Nicole and what happened and whatever, her witnessing all the murders and stuff, and the cop just blurts out, "Oh, Nicole's a boy,"
Yeah.
you know, and starts talking about it, and I went, "Oh my gosh," because you'd already told me that, and I said, "You're the second person who's told me that."
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the interesting thing, just as an aside, and I don't know, this may be a coincidence, but Anthony Kidman was working on the Pygmalion project as part of MK Ultra and the research in Australia, the top secret stuff with military intelligence and CIA and that. And the Pygmalion project was changing the gender of babies in utero.
Yeah. Yeah.
So whatever that was to do with. So
Yeah. And one of the things about her involvement with Scientology, like, I don't know how accurate this is, but I found an interesting Reddit post by someone who says they were paramedic out of Southern California.
yeah.
They remember being called out to like this big, you know, castle or church. Turned out it was Scientology. I'll link that here in the video for viewers. And basically, he just says,
I personally question that. I'll tell you why. I question that account. It may be real, but I don't know why it would be, because these people, multi-millionaires and billionaires and whatever, and especially Scientology, they've got a lot of money at their disposal. They have their own like mini hospitals on these sorts of campuses.
Yeah.
And they certainly, if they don't have that, they certainly have a crash cart on hand and drugs, and they've got all the drugs in the world. So they have their own paramedics and medics standing by for anything like that. So that's why I question that particular thing. It may be true or not, you know. I don't know.
because it's just a post on Reddit.
It's just an anomaly, which the first thing I thought was, oh, bullshit, you know, like half these people are bloody doctors and nurses.
So he's saying he's working for like a private paramedic company, and like goes through and basically figures out that that's Nicole, who's a part of a Scientology ritual that's gone bad. She's been pricked with too many needles with like hallucinogenic drugs or something like that in it. And anyway, it's just gone bad. But he said it was like people in robes on a stage, massive dining table or something like that. So I don't know. That's interesting there. People should read that anyway. Just to see what they think. But yeah, it's like eyes wide shut sort of stuff. And I mean, you look at the other movies that she's in. I'll leave the most important till last, but like Practical Magic. She's always playing a witch in something. Bewitched. She's in Bewitched. She even says, see if I can find the clip. Oh, I just love playing a witch. It's my favorite thing to play. I wonder why. But what other dodgy movies was she in? There was Stoker as well, which is kind of based off Dracula, whatever that is, Bram Stoker. Grace of Monaco as well. Grace of Monaco was like Grace Kelly was a massive occultist, member of the Order of the Solar Temple, stuff like that. And then the most important one is Batman Forever. Batman is, reportedly key in MK Ultra programming, but like in this case, it's very relevant because she plays the role of her father in the movie. She plays the role of a clinical psychologist, but she just coincidentally specializes in multiple personality disorder, which is the whole thing they use to control people like Fiona, the multiple personalities, the programming. Just Nicole is just coincidentally mirroring her father. And then, oh, by the way, she also specializes in traumatizing, young kids to split their personalities so they can use them as spies or sex slaves or whatever. So I'll see if I can play that clip where she's, basically saying, oh, hey, Batman, I know you've got multiple personalities from the trauma you suffered as a kid because I'm a psychologist and I know everything about this. And look, I can help you.
He'll slaughter them without thinking twice.
Agreed. A trauma powerful enough to create an alternate personality leaves the victim.
In a world where normal rules of right and wrong no longer apply.
Exactly.
Like you. Well, let's just say I could write a hell of a paper on a grown man who dresses like a flying rodent.
Bats aren't rodents, Dr. Meridian.
Really? I didn't know that. You are.
Batman's a victim of like mind control himself from the beginning as a child, like with the bats that traumatize him, and then he has all these different personalities and things like that. So just really interesting there. Just trying to find the other connections. Hey, you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sweet. And I guess the other connections that'll pop up later, like we're mentioning Bruce Spence and other people who I think are part of the OTO and whatever. But there's a lot you can say there, but I don't think it's coincidental that she's playing all these roles as a witch and then as an MK Ultra programmer during, Batman, and then being brought to fame by a satanic ritual abuse victim who sets up the only satanic ritual abuse clinic in Australia, and then also somehow gets involved in Scientology, which is basically like the OTO, super occult, involved in rituals, drug use, Luciferianism, all this crap, So this just so much occultism here in the Kidman family through Nicole and somewhat visible through her father, but yeah, just very strange. I guess we should talk about Bathurst and then let's wrap it up, eh? I think we've got to mention, because it is the Bathurst race day, like this is the anniversary. And I didn't even plan for this to happen on the date. I think it was meant to be, but it's not exactly easy for you to, the anniversary itself is just triggering, and I get that. And well, from my understanding, it's just one of the worst rituals that you'd ever been to. It's one of the worst things that anyone could ever go through. And yeah, it happened on the Bathurst race day, which fell on the Sunday fell on October 6, 1985. It's now October 7 today, and they're going to be racing shortly. But yeah, we want to talk about Bathurst. It's a very occult place, and it's just, you wouldn't think it. It's just an ordinary little town, but the planning of it. And I'll play some of the video from architect Henry Bialowis, who figured out that the whole town was designed around the golden ratio, and the whole town is divided into squares. Squares are very important in masonry, but yeah, it's all this hidden mathematics and sacred geometry in the design of the town, and the way the town is laid out. It's depicting the solar system and planets and astrological things. It just wasn't done by accident, and the planner, the designer, must have been a Freemason himself, or heavily interested in the occult, because there's no way that happened by accident. And right where the ritual,
it's like Canberra, our capital, was built according to a Freemason design by a Freemason.
Yeah, and like you think, well, that's a bigger, the whole town was, built around Freemasonry, but that was, Canberra's designs aren't as old as Bathurst, from what I understand, the Freemasonic designs. So this was like the first ritual place that was set up in Australia. There's so much significance behind this, and like even when I spoke to Christa, she was into ley lines and stuff like that, and said, "Oh, there's lots of ley lines around where I live, in the the North Shore, going into the Mount Ku-ring-gai area, and like Bathurst is apparently it's on the 33rd parallel, I think, and it's also like there's a lot of minerals around there, like gold, that are important in for people when they just decide where a ley line is. I think that has to do with a lot of electromagnetism, which the Illuminati are interested in. And
well, they're interested in this. It's supposed to be a thinner veil.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I thought, well, how does a town actually lose a town square? And what does the town square mean, and where actually is it? So I came across this map, which is Mitchell's sign map of 1833. And there are some things here that I'd like to point out. He writes the word square here, and then he numbers the squares around it. And if you continue that numbering, 9, 10, 11, 12. So what we're dealing with here is a kind of an enigma in a way, because I suddenly thought, well, what is he telling us here?
He's telling
he's
us
a
something. The
surveyor.
obvious thing would be go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Exactly right. So surveyors, by definition, are about giving information to people. And yet this guy was doing that, but in a kind of mysterious, enigmatic way. And I thought, well, what is the meaning of these numbers that seem to spiral out from this point? And then when I looked at the square, I suddenly realised this square doesn't have a boundary. All the other squares do. This square does not have a number. All the others do. This square does not have a name. And in the middle of it, he puts the word church. So the question that I think Mitchell was asking us, what is it that can't be bound, can't be named, can't be numbered, and begins in a geometric spiral?
Begins and ends.
Exactly right. So that's the Omega point. So what he's talking about here is, what he's created here is not just a blueprint for a town, but a blueprint for a way of life. Because what he's done is put the church in the exact Omega point.
In zero.
And so that's the meaning of that spiral, and that to me is the answer to the riddle. What is it that can't be named, bounded, numbered, and begins and ends in infinity? So that to me, I thought, well, who is this guy Mitchell? And then I came across references to him being a Mason, although I've not been able to confirm that in writing.
Right.
Because
he would have been initiated in an English lodge.
Correct. But not only that, he was part of the 59th Regiment.
Which had its own lodge.
Which had a military lodge.
They did see initiations.
Not only that, but his patron in Australia was George Murray, who was at that time the Grand Master of the London Lodge. Now, it happens that Mitchell was instructed by Governor Darling to create this town plan, but in his instructions he explicitly excluded town squares, for the simple reason that McMurray was very much into town squares because he was a Mason, but McMurray was called back to England and faced a tribunal about his profligate spending on things like town planning and all the rest of it. So there was no way that Darling, who was really a military man purely, was going to come out here and then do much the same and follow in the footsteps of McMurray. So
that's the whole idea of Halloween, right? Is that the veil gets thinner between the living and the dead?
I don't know, which came first, chicken or the egg? Is the veil thinner because it's Halloween, or does Halloween make the veil thinner? Anyway, or do all the rituals that everybody do at once, including inadvertently when they get involved in all the stuff, especially in America and all the, we're talking about Scandinavian countries with a friend of mine, they practice a version of Halloween. And, people indulging in these sorts of activities contributes to the thinning of the veil. So you don't know whether that's caused it or whether, everyone does these rituals because Halloween is a certain time of the year where the veil's thinner anyway, people, that's what I mean by chicken or egg.
Uh-huh. And I mean, this is it. Like, I think, so we know it's a big occult town. There's lots of Freemasonic lodges there too. Like in a small town, there was like 3 or 4 lodges at one point. Lots of Freemasons there. And one really interesting one was David Waddell or Waddell. I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but we'll just call him David. David Waddell. He was a really important Freemason in Bathurst. I think he was like deputy of one of the main lodges there. Anyway, grows up in Bathurst, whole family's in Bathurst, has a daughter called Leila. And her full name is Leila Ida Narissa Bathurst Waddell. So Bathurst is in her name. Was she named after the town or was she part of the Bathurst family? I'm still yet to figure that out, but there's a very influential Bathurst family, which is like a royal or aristocratic or noble family in England, related to the royal family, the Bathurst bloodline, if you want. Maybe there's some relation there. They do have a relation, that family has a relationship with the town of Bathurst itself, and I think it was named after them. But anyway, her name is Leila Bathurst Waddell. Anyway, so her father was a Freemason, and then she's an artist. She's I think she plays the violin, goes overseas, meets Aleister Crowley, becomes his mistress, and she's known as Aleister Crowley's Scarlet Woman.
What a coincidence!
Yeah, and she's from Bathurst and grows up in Bathurst. The family's still there. Bathurst is her middle name, and just becomes part of the OTO and helps set up parts of it, different groups of it. Becomes Australia's highest ranking member of the OTO. And does all this groundbreaking stuff in the Luciferians' words with the rites of Eleusis or whatever, all this stuff. Big figure in the world of Crowley and Luciferianism. But so just a coincidence that Bathurst is the most occulted location in Australia. She comes from there, meets Aleister Crowley, and then the worst ritual that you've had to go through was in Bathurst. And then interestingly,
Whose birthday was that event?
Well, we'll get to that. Oh, should we get to that?
Okay.
No. It was Richie Benno's birthday, October 6th.
Who?
October 6th is Richie Benno's birthday, so he's a big.
Really? What a coincidence! So it was because Rosalind Croucher organised that event. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Okay, so once you sent me, you said, "Hey, I think I found." What'd you call it? You said something nasty.
I said I got a description matching, that other woman, who was at Bathurst that you remember.
Yeah.
And just coincidentally, she's a flaming commie and's protecting pedos and's in the Australian Human Rights.
Yeah. So you
Commission.
send me a photo of her, and I knew because she was quite young back then. But she, you know how you get those people who look old even when they're young? They look like a bit granny,
Yeah.
And she's such an ugly mutt. And the next thing, and I looked her up, and then I saw a photo of her in a side-on one with the hair drawn back, and that's exactly how she presented herself at this ritual. And I said, I couldn't believe it. That's the ugly bitch. And fit the description perfectly. She's linked to she's linked to Patricia Ann Conlon, Nee Garden. She's now she's she's president of the Australian Human Rights Commission. She's a lawyer. And what's the first real big public act she does as head of the Australian Human Rights Commission? Defends a pedophile who lied on their resume to a bank, who sacked him, during his 3-month trial, and said, "No, you lied to us. We didn't know you were a pedophile."
Yeah.
And that's fair enough. A, you're a criminal. B, you lied on your resume. There's grounds for sacking.
Yep.
No, she's going to defend the pedophile. That's Rosalind Croucher, absolute bitch, who urinated in my mouth at Bathurst at the after party. She set up that party because she was jealous that I had been nominated Grand Dame by Patricia instead of her. And she's too ugly and dumb anyway to be in the role. Can I just jab it in? And then she also, I've reported her for also, she, at the end of it all, in front of Leonys Petraskas in a back room after that event, she had these, those crash kits with the heart starters, where you give someone electrocution. She had those and she shoved them on my head and did it, and she went insane. And then I said to Petraskas, I said, and Petraskas had to drag her off me because she was just going hysterical. And he says, no, he's going, no, you're going to get in trouble. He just couldn't believe what she was doing.
Yep.
And then after that, we were alone, me and Petraskas, and I said, let me at her. Yeah. So, yeah, I know that bitch. She's the one who joined in the orgy at the end of it all, but she arranged all of that, and the indignant rape of me by Bruce Spence on the altar in the middle. Yeah. She did all of that to humiliate me, and she said, "Oh, let's bring you down a peg."
Yeah.
So that's what was behind that.
Not good. And behind the ritual, there was a big banner, and you drew that from memory. And it's, you can't just make this up. There's something to it. You remembered it for a reason. And I'll put.
And also, Steve, when I used to draw things, it's like the Baal statue that I did. That's underneath in the underground tunnel system underneath Engadine Boys Town, which is a perfect drawing. Ridiculous,
Yeah.
And the same with that banner. When I did that, I was taught to draw that banner, and it's like in a sacred geometry ways. That's freehand drawn. That.
Wow.
Freehand drawn that, and if you get a ruler and measure up, it's pretty close. For freehand, it's pretty close to making up both a pentagram and a hexagram, and then you can overlay the Freemason compass.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like, the order this thing, because we mentioned order of Lenin, order of Stalin, all this stuff. These orders are important. But this one, the banner up behind the ritual was the Order of the Eagle. So this is the banner here. It's on screen. The eagle I find important because it's very descriptive. There's 6 wings, there's 6 talons, and then there's 6 points of the hexagram in there. So it's 666, and then you've got the tell us the symbols that are in each corner of the flag.
Okay, from memory, because I'm not even looking at it. You've got up the top left, you've got the rod of Asclepius.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that represents pharmakeia, or the drugs and everything that they use within medicine. And the bottom left, I still haven't worked that out properly. It's the triangle which is dissected into 3 triangles. I thought it was kind of the something to do with the Satanic Trinity and that, but it's more delta, I think.
Yeah.
So it could be the relationship to, because it's the symbol for delta, so it could be relating to all the aspects that you find within delta mind control, which is actually all that sort of information stems down from Luciferian Babylon, all the knowledge and splitting and Egypt and all that. But I will get back to that more later, because I did write some notes on that. I haven't got them up. But the top right one I know well, and the bottom right I know well. So the bottom right is a lollipop, isn't it? It's a circle with a line through the bottom. I used to call it the lollipop as a kid. Now that represents an egg being pierced with a hypodermic needle. That represents cloning, and that is the it's the two-dimensional form of the Cleopatra's needle. So the obelisk, which they talk shit, right, on the internet about what the obelisk represents and whatever. They don't know. I'll tell you what it represents. It's the Cleopatra's needle. The obelisk is a giant blown up hypodermic needle. It's about cloning. The Egyptians were into cloning. That's why they preserved their DNA. Okay, there's a lot of ancient knowledge and stuff that's been left, and they did that. They preserved all their things because they knew that the technology would come back, and that's why the ancient Egyptian cult is what's behind a lot of Freemasonry, and that's why they've got a lot of the Egyptian symbols, and that's why they're trying to resurrect Nimrod and all that sort of stuff, or Osiris, or whatever you want to call all this crap, or Apollyon, or whatever. So they've got all of that, and then they've got the top right is the symbol for psi, PSI, which is what you use in psychology. It's a symbol for psychology, but it represents psychology, because psychology is based on Luciferian doctrine as well. So all of the people that informed modern psychology, they were all worked for MK Ultra. All the fathers of modern psychology work for MK Ultra, and it's all about behavior, human behavior control. That's what Psychology 101 is. How to manipulate human behavior, and that's what MK Ultra is.
Yep. And yeah.
But the bottom left, I think the bottom left, I'm just saying, the bottom left, I think it's more to do with the Delta, like the astral projection stuff that you did as part of Delta Special Ops, all of the psychic warfare and the specialist assassin training, right? So I think that's what the bottom left is connected with.
For sure. I mean,
but I'll tell you why I didn't remember that one well, the bottom left, because I'm still processing all of that. That's the worst stuff.
Yeah.
You know, since subsequent to when I spoke to you first a few years ago, I've had to go through that stuff because it's just so bad. And what happened with Delta Special Ops and Aquino's programming at Dulce when I was 14. That was the finishing off of the you know, all of that sort of stuff. The Gateway Project, which, you know, appears in that CIA document. But sorry, I digress. But
no, you want to hear another coincidence?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, well, you know, so you got the Order of the Eagle.
It's 11 o'clock. It's too early for a beer. Go on, hit me.
So you got the Order of the Eagle banner that you remember from memory that was drawn on your grandparents' shed window, I think.
Yeah, garage and laundry windows.
Laundry window, yep.
One of those, either one or both.
All right, sweet. And so that, you know, it's been found by police, that image. So, you know, you remember it as the Order of the Eagle. And that was in Bathurst at the City Hall on the race day. And the rituals, you know, satanic rituals are going on there. And, you know, so if we know that, you know, the most influential figure in OTO history, you know, one of the most, I think probably, you know, one or two, definitely the most influential. It's arguable. But yeah, so Leila Bathurst Waddell, middle name's Bathurst, comes from Bathurst, becomes Aleister Crowley's mistress, helps set up the OTO in Australia. Anyway, so you're at the ritual, Order of the Eagle banner. It just out of coincidence, the OTO has their own Order of the Eagle, which you didn't know, which I didn't know when investigating this. But it's called the Order of the Eagle, and guess who's a member of that? Who's been posthumously awarded membership in that? Guess who? Leila Bathurst Waddell. So, you know, you know, you got an Order of the Eagle. This Aleister Crowley woman from Bathurst is a member of that. So I just find that a fascinating
So
thing.
Aleister Crowley's girlfriend,
Yeah.
Leila Bathurst Waddell, from Bathurst, where that horrendous ritual was,
Yep.
has posthumously been ordered the OTO's highest Order of the Eagle.
Exactly. And I'll just bring up more information about that. So this is not the same Order of the Eagle that Fiona remembers, but obviously it's got to have something to do with it, right? Like, it's not just a coincidence.
Well, being given an award, a highest Order of the Eagle award, I mean, you know, it's pretty close to what I was saying. See, that banner is not necessarily the OTOs. That banner was erected at non-OTO Luciferian rituals as well.
Yeah.
So the Order of the Eagle, you know, I mean, you've got Hitler's stuff. I always thought it was related to Hitler because that was, you know, you got the eagle on it, everything on his banners.
But see, this is why I think like the OTO is just like a guy off the street pleb organization, because like
it is.
They're obviously copying the Illuminati, what we would just call the Illuminati. They're getting their information from something, because they created this like in the 90s. Obviously, the ritual happened in the like mid 80s, and they inducted Leila Waddell into the Order of the Eagle, which is just for women too, which I find interesting because you're the head of the Order of the Eagle. You're a woman as part of the ritual. So the Order of the Eagle is for women. The Order of the Lion is for men. So, you know, this was obviously surrounding you. You were the key part of this ritual, you know. The ritual was for you, basically, as head of the order, right? Head of the Order of the Eagle was for women. So that's just another coincidence as well. And then...
Yeah, well, they told me that's what it's for, and it was all nice. That's how they sucked me in, and then they did that to me. And I just add there that what they did to me and the humiliation that Rosicrucians did, because, you know, Kidman, Bell, Crouch, and that, they hated me. Okay, they didn't treat me the same with the respect as the, you know, others. People like Gideon never really, he never disrespected me. He just really treated me as an equal. Although I was a victim, big deal. We're all victims. Yeah. But I was treated as an equal and whatever. But these guys did that, and that Bathurst ritual is one of the arguments I used for leaving the whole order.
Yep.
So we refer to the entire organisation as the order. If you ask me, it's like Shane asked me, what do you call it, Fiona? I went, no one's ever asked me that before. It just came, I said, the order. Because I was thinking the family is what you talk about. It's your family, right, as a little kid. But later on, as a teenager, you call it the order.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I just find that too coincidental. You know, it just fits. And I mean, like the OTO. I mean, look, they're not. Probably going to sue us for saying this or something, but I don't think they can anymore because, like,
sue me, a victim, for saying they raped me?
Well, see, I don't think it was the OTO that did it to you. I just think like
that was OTO all over it. When you look
it's connected, but I don't think it's exactly them. Like, they copy this. They wish they were like your group. They wish they had your secrets. They're just like rounds off the street. Was in charge
of that Sydney diocese of the OTO.
So obviously it comes under the umbrella, I think. But like, you know, people don't. You know, you shouldn't just like, because they will go crazy.
You're concerned about when they tried to sue Raina Michelson, which was.
And see, this is why I think it's set up, because they're there to protect your group by saying, by luring people in to blame them and say, it's this particular group. They have the protections in place to set up people.
Yeah, but the thing is, they went in Melbourne. They went for religious discrimination, but we're not discriminating because it's all of them. It's even the Protestant churches. It's Hillsong, which was set up specifically as a child trafficking organisation. And they make kids on snuff film. You know, people can say what they want, but there's a reason they want to suck you for all your money, which is completely unbiblical. Yeah. You know, tithing is not biblical. Sorry, it's not. Look, and giving to that scumbucket, you know, pedo organisation is certainly not biblical. So it's not about that. But even when they did that to Raina in Melbourne, it was completely illegal. She didn't even fall under that jurisdiction. You know, and she was fearful because they were also doing other things, like AJ running around chasing her and they're threatening her life, and that bush pig of a police commissioner, you know, covered it all up. The blondie one, Christine
Nixon.
Yeah, she covered it all up. She was sent all the tapes of Victorian police raping kids. So it wasn't just about it was, and it was that those other group. There was another people infiltrated her group and betrayed her and published her stuff without her permission. Yeah. And, you know, the mistake she made was in that document, she didn't name Channel 10. She didn't name Graham Kennedy. She didn't name Bert Newton. She didn't name Jeff Kennett, you know, the politician who was they were all raping kids and trafficking kids. the only one that was named was the OTO, and that was a setup by the people who did
Exactly.
that to her.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's all that was about. And she could have fought that and won, but, you know, she was beaten down with everything that happened to her.
And I want to make this clear because, like, I don't want people to go off and say, "Oh, look, they're raping kids and stuff like that." No, I mean, it's possible that they could be, but I'm not going to say that they are.
I'm just saying, I don't know what happened in other areas. Raina Michelson said they were committing those crimes in Melbourne.
Yep.
And I witnessed this group.
And hey, I got to mention too, the name is used, but there's also different groups. So the one that's registered in Australia necessarily isn't the OTO that did that. I mean, the one that's registered, they use to lure people in to blame that one so they can sue them and shut them up and protect the other groups. But there are other groups and spin-offs before Crowley called the OTO. And I think that is what maybe was involved in the ritual at Bathurst, that same type of group. It could have been called the OTO, but it was a different group of people. These ones, when you look at the Australian registered, religious group or whatever they call themselves, it's a setup. It's a setup for people to go and blame them to protect the other group. They're plebs. They don't know shit. They're nobodies, and they're all.
I get you now. I get what you're saying. I didn't realise all the various. I just knew what
I forgot to mention that. It's just in the back of my mind, and then I just realised how important that was, and so that's what I think they do. But anyway, just to clear that up.
And we don't know what's happening now either. My stuff is from the 80s and 70s.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what's happening now. I just know who was there and what was happening then. You know, like I said, there's no way they could use the Great Hall or any of the sites that I've named quite easily, because you've got all these vigilante groups and kids, you know, teenagers going, oh, look at this, let's go and check out what they might be doing, which I don't recommend, guys. Halloween's coming up. Don't go and think this is a bit of fun and take, vision goggles and go out to the local bloody cemetery and see what you can find, because they'll kill you if they catch you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just not worth it. The best thing is to pray against it, because it does really affect these people.
It does.
Yeah.
There's power in prayer, and genuine prayer.
One person who really, on his Twitter account, really pokes fun of people praying is Bruce Spence, and he was at the ritual. He's the one who raped Fiona. And let's just talk about him for a second quickly. I think I'll just probably edit this bit out, but basically, I guess we'll finish up soon. But I'll probably finish on Bruce Spence. And then we'll go into like Kim Beazley, like on the next bit. But anyway, Bruce Spence, what can we say about him? He was at the ritual, and I think he's a member of the OTO. I actually do, and there's a few good reasons here. And
I know he's a member of the OTO because he was at the OTO ritual in the Great Hall. Yeah. And I wrote his name down on that. He was in one of the coloured robes.
Here's a message to the OTO. If you want to go around suing people, why aren't you suing Bruce Spence? Okay. I'll probably just put this in later. Message to the OTO, why aren't you suing Bruce Spence? He's the one going on ABC on public television, free to air, insinuating that you are a pedophile group that kills children in satanic rituals and is a part of the Illuminati. I mean, that's what he alleges in your show. Just sort of thought I'd mention that as a side note before I forget it. But basically, Bruce Spence, he was very close to Liz Molinar as well, and the Kidman family. He was also at
John Bell.
Yep. When Fiona was brought by Leonys Petrascus to Anthony Kidman's house, John Bell and Bruce Spence were there.
That was the night that was the night I was 14 and I was turning 15 that night.
Yeah. And, Bruce Spence is involved with the Nimrod Theatre. Interesting name again.
And people, for those who don't know, like Americans and that, Bruce Spence is a shit B-grade actor who was in films like Mad Max.
Yeah.
And Dimboola, some old Aussie films, and he's tall and he's got very demonic eyes.
Yeah.
Tall and ugly. And he's one of the priests within the Luciferian groups.
And look, here's the thing. Fiona remembered all the stuff that happened at Bathurst prior to this show, which I'm about to talk about, that Bruce Spence helped create on the ABC. Anyway, Fiona reported this to Bathurst police, And then shortly afterwards, Bruce Spence makes a reply to that in the form of an episode of a TV show called Double the Fist. The episode was called Local Council. Anyway, I'll play that for you now, but basically he is taking what Fiona remembers and has reported to police, and he's using that to poke fun of it, to make it look like she got it from the TV show, but the order is that, Fiona remembered it first, reported it, and then this show's made. So I think it's the other way around. It doesn't really ridicule Fiona, it just proves a point. So basically, at that ritual, there's obviously the killing of children. Bruce Spence uses a samurai sword to decapitate the children, to kill the children. And Fiona's there, hypnotized, out of her mind. And, there's this Order of the Eagle connection, this OTO connection. Anyway, just coincidentally, Bruce Spence then goes on, makes this show about where the lead character is investigating this cult, and everyone thinks he's insane. He's saying, oh, look, it's the Illuminati. They're killing people. They're kidnapping. They're eating children. And we've got to do something about it. Anyway, when it goes to the scene where they're learning about the cult, Bruce Spence just comes in a city hall type environment, like the ritual is held in. He's wearing a robe, just as he was during the ritual. He then pulls out a baby, eats the baby, like killing of children, which was done at the Bathurst City Hall as well. And he's also he's then shown to be a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis, this OTO group, this Aleister Crowley cult group. Anyway, it goes on. And they're fighting against him and stuff, and then Bruce Spencer's like, oh, it's so great to eat children, dingoes do it all the time, and they're saying, oh, look, it's the Illuminati, blah, 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 all this stuff. Anyway, what I find interesting is specifically the samurai sword thing comes up, because in the show, and you'll see this as I'm playing it on screen, Bruce Spence is in control of a hypnotized assassin, pretty much what Fiona was like at that time, under complete hypnosis. And the hypnotized assassin in the show that's about to go kill, the guy who's investigating the OTO and them eating babies, the assassin's carrying a samurai sword, just like Bruce used at the Bathurst City Hall during that ritual. So you got, the location's the same, the cult's similar. The theme is exactly the same. There's the killing of children. There's the samurai sword. And I think this was made in response to Fiona's allegations. Somehow he knew or was informed that Fiona said this, and the cat's out of the bag. Got to do something about it. So, in
where
a way,
does it fit in with when I reported everything to the health board about Kidman?
Well, this episode I think was done in 2007 or 8. I'll get the exact date.
Oh, that's ages.
Yeah, like
So
your original original report said.
well, I originally reported all this in 1991.
Yeah.
Officially, 91 is when I first reported it in a hospital, in a public hospital. So, so it wouldn't be hard for anybody working in records or anybody. There were Luciferian members in the Gold Coast Hospital and whatever when I reported all this. So they blurted that straight away. And then there were other people in Bundaberg. They had a copy of my original book I wrote back in the early 90s and nearly got published. By Albatross Books in Sydney and Nelson Word in England. And, so not hard back then to spread the word.
Exactly. So, yeah, he was kind of poking fun at the whole thing here, saying, you're never going to get me. But, so he's playing a member of the OTO, but, even in an interview that was done with Bruce about costumes in Mad Max and other movies, he specifically talks about his interest in Freemasonry. Yeah, and how he was the one who decided he'd wear it.
And she, told me what she had in mind and the kind of look that she wanted. And I sort of suggested a few things. I think I suggested a Freemason's apron.
And then you look at the other movies that he's involved with. It makes you wonder, like the Matrix series as well. The two transgender directors behind that, there's a lot of speculation that they're OTO members, that the film is actually like an allegory of Osiris, which is, all that Egyptian, mystery stuff that's prominent in the OTO. You look at, he's in a movie called Blue World Order where he plays a torturer, and he's torturing people in torture chambers, and he's a member of the Order. The Order, and he's torturing people. Blue World Order, New World Order, coincidence? He's then, let's see, in the Matrix movies, in the Mad Max films, a lot of Masonic themes in there. Just having a look at what else. It's in all sorts of these, like, there's lots of devil themes in plays and stuff like that. The White Devil, all these sorts of, ritual type, plays and things. I'm just trying to think of the other ones that he was in. But, what
He
else?
was in that, he was in some weird plays.
Oh yeah, the Gods of Egypt. He was in that movie. Also, no, in Lord of the Rings, he plays the voice of Sauron. Basically the Satan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He plays that. He's also in a Disney movie as the voice of Bruce. Or is it Charm, the shark? Anyway, he's that voice playing a predator in a kids film. That's funny. In a Disney, it's like Disney Pixar that made Finding Nemo. He's in that. Disney's full of pedos. So no coincidences there. What else? He's in a film by Alex Proyas, who's a famous Australian director, but there's a lot of information that says he's a member of the OTO as well. So there's connections there. Just interesting as well. People should look into that because, he might be an okay guy, but he's got to be related or involved with the OTO at some point. Just from his connections there, like he's obsessed with, the occult and stuff like that, and has worked with the OTO and things.
He's vile. He's just a vessel for Lucifer. There's nothing left of him. He's just a shell. He's so possessed.
Yeah.
So possessed, there's nothing left of that monster.
Yeah.
And it angers me that, Belinda Abdi didn't pursue the charge against him for rape.
Yeah.
Because I've got a time, date, place, for goodness sake.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nah. But, Abdi's covering it all up, isn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Just, this